Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, DwyerVIP.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. There is a fascinating heavyweight fight taking place this month between former NFL player, a guy chosen 5 places ahead of Tom Brady in the NFL draft, right? 17-0, 6'4", Leif Larsen. And he's taking on a fighter I believe is an uncrowned champion. In other words, the way I see boxing, and I know this is against public opinion, but the way I see boxing is I think this guy, quite frankly, is as good as anyone in the heavyweight division. He's had a title shot. His knee blew up at the end of a round that was competitive. And he is Odlanier Solis, right? Solis's loss to Vitaly Klitschko remains the only loss on his record, right? Now this fight is fascinating because Leif Larsen is a great athlete. This guy was a shot putter. This guy actually played for 3 years in the NFL, right? He was actually a starter for a little bit less than half a season in 2001 with the Buffalo Bills. And he hits awfully hard. He knocked down Danny Williams several times before stopping Danny Williams, right? I believe Danny Williams' corner threw in the towel in the fight, right? So he's a big guy, and he's bigger than Odlanier Solis. He's 6'4". Solis is less than 6'2". And of course, Larsen is unbeaten. And he's fighting Solis, who isn't a great athlete. Comes in with some body fat, right? Was criticized by David Haye for coming in with body fat. Solis typically weighs 250 or higher for fights, right? Solis obviously has a reconstructed knee. There was criticism of Solis after the Vitaly Klitschko fight. There were people out there who thought that Solis, in the biggest fight of his life, for the heavyweight championship, did not show up in shape. But here's the difference between the two guys. This is the sweet science. And Solis can fight, right? This isn't the decathlon. They're not going to go out and do a shot putting contest. They're not going to put on pads and see who's a better American football player. No. They're in the ring. Boxing really is a skill sport. And the reason why I'm taking Solis in this fight, in fact, let me go further. Part of my money is going to be on Solis by KO, right? Because I'm expecting a KO. The reason why I'm taking Solis in this fight is simply because Solis is a technician with skills that can offset the superior athleticism of Leif Larsen. Let's talk about Leif Larsen. Like many of these athletes who then venture into boxing, Leif Larsen, in my opinion, doesn't have the natural instincts of a fighter, right? In my opinion, there's a difference between guys who have been fighting since they're teenagers and guys who pick up the sport late after making the big leagues or the NFL earlier in their career, right? Larsen, big guy, muscular guy, stands too straight. He's not agile. He doesn't bend his knees. Doesn't have enough of a jab. Doesn't work his way in behind a jab. What he is a big right hand. He can throw an overhand right. He can throw an uppercut. And he's just in the ring trying to frame that big right hand. Because if that right hand lands, it's a KO. So in his 17 fights, Larsen has 14 knockouts. That's a greater than 80% KO ratio. His fights follow a pattern where they're lounging around, he lands a few big right hands, the other guy falls down, everyone goes home. Right? The problem is, and I know this hasn't happened, because he is unbeaten. But the problem is, he looks like, to me, your typical athletic, big heavyweight before Lennox Lewis. Right? What Lennox Lewis did was Lennox Lewis actually brought nimbleness and skills to big men. Right? Lewis wasn't just big. Lewis was skilled. Right? Lewis was actually in there doing more to you. Right? Hitting you with a jab. Actually outboxing you even when he wasn't knocking you out. Right? Leif Larsen, to me, looks like a big guy who knows he's big, who knows he hits hard. He probably typically hits harder than his opponent. So against a more seasoned fighter like Danny Williams, you see him literally just pawing, not jabbing, but pawing with his left hand, just cocking back his right hand, trying to throw a few straight rights, and then when he has Williams hurt and the fight slows down, then he's able to land the right uppercut. Right? I believe that he's going to get taken apart by Odlanier Solis. Solis, in my opinion, and this is for the IBF Intercontinental Championship, Solis, in my opinion, is highly skilled. Will be able to literally get inside on Leif Larsen in a way that no one has. Solis has built-in leverage. Right? Take a look at Solis against Monty Barrett. That film is up on YouTube. The punches are short. The only way you know they're hard punches is by looking at Monty Barrett, who is getting rocked. Right? In my opinion, Solis can hold his own against anyone in the heavyweight division. Right? I thought he had a shot on Vitaly Klitschko. I still think he has a shot on Vitaly Klitschko. I'd love to see him against Vladimir Klitschko. I question Vladimir Klitschko's inside game. I think Solis would be able to walk him down. Understand, I believe that the public is down on Solis because Solis has body fat. But there was a time when great heavyweights, Larry Holmes for example, came in the ring and looked like heavyweights. Didn't look like guys out of a Mr. Universe contest, but actually looked like heavyweights. Right? Yes, Solis has body fat. Yes, he's not going to win Mr. Universe anytime soon. But Solis throws short punches. He has a high guard, which is going to help him against a taller fighter that he's going to be able to get underneath. In other words, Larsen, in my opinion, doesn't have the body attack to get below Solis's guard. Right? I'm expecting Solis to win this fight going away and understand the repercussions. Solis, post-reconstructive knee surgery, will then be in a position to call out the bigger names in the heavyweight division. Right? If you're going to watch a heavyweight who has a chance to literally be the next great heavyweight, and I know many of my subscribers, O.J. Stinston comes to mind, are laughing at this, but I believe Odlanier Solis has that potential. I like Solis in this fight. If I'm laying big money, I believe Larsen's only chance of winning the fight is how he's won 80% of his fights to date, by KO. Yes, Larsen has a KO possibility, especially since Solis has a rebuilt knee and has already torn an ACL in a previous fight. Keep in mind, you can win by KO without dominating your opponent. Fans of Vitaly Klitschko know this from Klitschko's victory over Odlanier Solis, right? If Solis physically breaks down and can't continue, whether you had anything to do with it or not, if you're the opponent, you're going to win the fight by KO, right? So, I believe Solis wins this fight. I'm expecting Solis to win the fight by knockout, right? But I would hedge the play with Larsen by knockout. Let's talk about David Haye. Then I'm going to have just a few words on Timothy Bradley. David Haye apparently has decided to resume his boxing career, even though he has been unable to lure a Klitschko in the ring with him, right? Vladimir doesn't want to give Haye a rematch. Vitaly apparently can't agree on a price with David Haye. Now, I have mixed feelings about this, right? I personally like the idea of young guys, right? Guys who have ruled the roost and are still in their late 20s, early 30s, who are able to walk away from the sport with their health, without the detached retina, without brain injury, without the reconstructed knee, right? Walk away from the sport healthy with a lot of money in their bank account. To me, we need more guys like that in boxing, right? Because, of course, it'll inspire other fighters to manage their careers in a way where that can be them, right? They walk away young, healthy, and wealthy, right? Young and rich, nothing wrong with that, right? And when a guy walks away young and rich, he's able to still be around boxing events, right? Ringside, as a commentator, as an icon for all of us in the sport. Not only that, it might even inspire some of these young athletes, guys with a lot of choices, right? Boxing, baseball, basketball, to say, you know what? I'm going to go into boxing because I know it's possible to be a superstar in boxing and then to retire young and rich, famous, VIP at future boxing events, icon and mentor for younger fighters, right? So to me, David Haye was in that position. Understand, this guy was the undisputed cruiserweight champion. This guy then became heavyweight champion of the world, right? Very few cruisers become heavyweight champs, right? It's a real short list, right? He was able to win the heavyweight championship in a different country. Then he was able to defend it. People need to remember his fight against John Ruiz. Ruiz himself, a former champ, right? Haye had his moments. Then, of course, he fights Vladimir Klitschko. Let's remember, he went the distance with Vladimir Klitschko, which is very hard to do, right? It's not like Haye went in and got blown out. No, he went the distance with Vladimir Klitschko. Let's overlook this whole toe thing and just think about what actually happened. Then, of course, even after the fight with Vladimir Klitschko, he then fights, Derek Chisora, and he does something current heavyweight champion Vitaly Klitschko was unable to do. He actually stops Derek Chisora. So David Haye is in his early 30s, right? He's wealthy. He's been fabulously paid. The Derek Chisora fight had tens of thousands of people at it. It was a media sensation, high-profile fight. Quite frankly, I was hoping that either Haye would fight a Klitschko, fight a big fight and then leave the stage, or Haye would just leave the stage and say, you know what, I'm going to walk away while I still have some fight in me. I'm going to walk away like Lennox Lewis walked away, and I'm going to, move on to other challenges and be an icon of how to leave the sport with your health and with riches, right? Instead, and boxing's a seductive mistress, Instead, David Haye is yet another one of these guys who says, hey, I'm retired. And then that mistress starts calling him back. And he starts remembering those lovely nights. He starts remembering the fun, the excitement. And you know the rest. Now he's coming back. I only want to see David Haye, quite frankly, against 3 fighters. Actually 4. I'm being totally selfish here because I want to see elite fighters leave the sport with their legacies. Right? So just like I don't want to see Juan Manuel Marquez fight a journeyman fighter and then lose. Right? Just like, I was cringing when Ali decided to fight Leon Spinks, when Leon Spinks only had 7 pro fights. Right? I want the big names to leave the sport, really like Lennox Lewis did. If you're unlucky and you lose that last match, then leave like Marvin Hagler did, where that last match, many in the stands believe you won the last match. Right? You can leave with your head up knowing you gave a legendary performance in your last fight. Right? What we don't want is a Joe Louis, Rocky Marciano situation where a great fighter gets knocked out of the ring in his last fight. So, I don't want David Haye fighting journeymen. I don't believe there are tune-up fights because, I'm using the word journeyman. Sometimes the guys we call journeymen are actually top 10 contenders, right? These are guys who actually have skills. Tony Thompson was called a journeyman before he fought David Price, right? These journeymen are dangerous. I don't want David Haye risking his legacy against a journeyman. In my opinion, Haye should only fight the men who hold heavyweight titles, right? Make it a heavyweight title fight. So, the Klitschko brothers, either Klitschko, right? Vladimir or Vitaly, or Alexander Povetkin, right? Make it a heavyweight title fight. And if he's not going to fight them, then I want him to fight former amateur champion, former opponent of David Haye's. They had a great dust-up in the amateurs, right? Former Olympic gold medalist, Odlanier Solis. Those are the guys I want David Haye to fight, right? I don't want David Haye risking it against a Dennis Boystoff, even though Boystoff is unbeaten with a big punch, a Deontay Wilder, a Bryant Jennings. These are very impressive fighters. Right? These are very impressive young lions, but they don't have a belt that they can give David Haye. Right? They don't. And unfortunately, the public, despite their talent, doesn't know enough about them to bestow on David Haye the kind of legacy builder, extra legacy premium that he would deserve if he were to beat a Deontay Wilder or a Bryant Jennings, right? So, let's hope David Haye picks an opponent that can help him build his legacy. In my opinion, those are the heavyweight champs or Odlanier Solis. Let me hear from you on that. I know some people are going to say, hey, what about Chris Arreola? That would be a fascinating fight. What about Jonathan Banks? That would be a fascinating fight. What about Kubrat Pulev? That would be a fascinating fight. These guys are skilled. I'm not here denigrating anyone's skills. All I'm saying is the boxing hardcore is not the general public, right? The general public is interested in, fighters they know. And all I'm saying is if you're a superstar like David Haye, a guy who can sell out a $30,000 arena for a fight against Derek Chisora that wasn't even for a title. If you're a superstar like David Haye, you don't want to fight a highly skilled, very good, unknown fighter. You want to fight someone people know about, right? Okay, let's talk about one other thing too. Timothy Bradley. I'm very concerned. Understand that fighters can recover from a lot of injuries, right? Broken bones, broken jaws, broken arms, broken legs, torn tendons. But the one injury that I've found that a fighter really can't fully recover from is brain injury, right? Sometimes you see these fighters and a guy has an iron chin. Once that chin gets dented and the guy gets knocked out, it's amazing how often after that the guy can get knocked out. Now, just like I'm concerned about Manny Pacquiao and Roy Jones, both of them knocked out in fights where they were out on the canvas, I'm very concerned with Timothy Bradley, who has admitted in interviews that he doesn't remember parts of the fight. He has amnesia. Think about that. In boxing, where you're going to get hit in the head. In fact, your opponent's trying to hit you in the head, right? Timothy Bradley has amnesia. He doesn't remember portions of the fight. This is from a good source. It's from him, right? Bradley even goes further and says that he thought he was losing the fight because he lost track of the fight. He didn't even have a running total in his head of how far he was behind or ahead. There's a moment where he goes to his corner. He turns to Joel Diaz, one of boxing's very best trainers, and he says, "Am I winning the fight?" He did not know. Now, let me just say, given that part of Timothy Bradley's game is to come inside and mix it up. That's why Timothy Bradley has a reputation for headbutts, right? Because in past fights, the Devin Alexander fight, he came inside and there was a clash of heads. That fight got stopped after a headbutt, right? Given that that's part of his game and part of who he is, people need to take this amnesia story seriously. I know we passed the CAT scan, but understand it's going to be months, at least it should be months, before Timothy Bradley even tries to spar again, right? Timothy Bradley apparently is known to be a gym rat. He's the kind of guy who loves to be in the gym. He loves to be in the ring. This is going to be new for him. By his own admission, he had never been beaten up like this before, right? So he's going to have to walk away from the sport. There's going to have to be a break in his career rhythm. He's going to have to walk away from the sport, in my opinion, for at least 3 or 4 months. I'm talking about no sparring. He's going to have to walk away from the sport. Give his head a chance to heal before he even gets back in the ring and spars again, right? I don't want Timothy Bradley fighting 2 more times this year. I want Timothy Bradley taking time off. As I said, I want these fighters to be able to eventually retire relatively young and wealthy, right? At least have the option. If you want to go on like Bernard Hopkins, okay, great. That's your decision. David Haye, okay, great. But I want a fighter like Timothy Bradley, who's invested so much into the sport, to be able to one day leave the sport without slurred speech and head trauma. So my point too, and this is something gamblers always have to keep in mind, is that you can't bet on Timothy Bradley in his next world-class fight, right? When a fighter gets beat up like this and actually admits to amnesia, you need to see the fighter in his next fight before you'll know whether the fighter is still the fighter, right? Let me tell you, Jerry Quarry, after he beat Ernie Shavers, had a fight against some guy. And apparently Quarry's timing was off. People who knew Quarry thought something was wrong. Jerry Quarry wasn't Jerry Quarry. Let me tell you, it's an open question whether Jerry Quarry ever was Jerry Quarry again, right? Quarry, needless to say, had a career downturn. If you look at young Jerry Quarry, especially his fight against Ernie Shavers, who hadn't lost for several years before that fight, you're going to see an explosive fighter with excellent timing, unafraid, with power, right, and rhythm, right? Later, Jerry Quarry, after he got hit in the head enough, seemed to lose a sense of the timing. Let's hope that hasn't happened to Timothy Bradley. Let me point out that even Bradley's opponent, Ruslan Provodnikov, claims that the ref may have shortened his career. I'm just here to tell you that this fight was so grueling for Timothy Bradley, you need to consider it to be 5 fights for Timothy Bradley, right? The fighters with longevity. A Bernard Hopkins has never been beaten up like this. Floyd Mayweather has never been beaten up like this. These are the kind of fights that shorten a fighter's career. Let's pay attention to this story. My advice to gamblers is to certainly watch Bradley's next fight, but I wouldn't lay any heavy money on it, even if it looks like a mismatch in Bradley's favor. Let me hear from you. As usual, another long-winded video. Sorry about that. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. Thanks for stopping by.